course, one of the reasons that the Declaration of Independence took place was a dispute among the American colonists at the time and the mother country of Britain over taxes. And it seems a good idea to talk about some taxes during the course of this program. And that's why we bring on, at this point, Andrew Moylan, who is executive director of the R Street Institute, who's going to talk to us about a bill that could affect the way that sales tax is levied on sales that take place online in the years to come. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So the legislation that you are monitoring very closely is a piece of legislation that has already made it through the U.S. Senate with support from both of North Carolina's senators and sits now in the House. What is this legislation?
It's, as many Washington items are, hilariously named the Marketplace Fairness Act. And what the Marketplace Fairness Act would do is say for sales that are made over the Internet from one state to another, that they would force states, allow states to force businesses to collect and remit sales tax, whether or not they have a physical presence in that state. So what does that mean for North Carolina? That means that North Carolina merchants that sell online, that sell to people across the border in South Carolina or across the country in Washington, they would be required to collect those other states' sales taxes and remit the dollars to them and be responsible for audits and enforcement actions, despite the fact that they might not have any physical presence there. That's the basic limitation that exists right now. A state can't force a business to collect its tax unless it's physically present there, and this bill is trying to wipe that away.
The argument from the people representing brick and mortar stores is, hey, we collect sales taxes. People who sell online ought to collect sales taxes. Why do you think that is not the right argument?
Well, because what it does is it overlooks the sort of physical presence test. The reason that brick and mortar stores have to collect and remit sales tax is they have a physical presence in that state. They benefit from its services, and their customers do as well. And, what we have done is placed a common sense limitation on states from being overly aggressive in trying to enforce their tax laws on businesses or individuals that aren't present in that state, that lack that physical presence. We have had experiments with that kind of unbounded state tax power in the past. It was called the Articles of Confederation, and we saw how that devolved into all kinds of protectionist measures that harmed interstate commerce. And so, the brick-and-mortar businesses are not wrong to be concerned about the differences in business models and what the law says about them. But what they're asking for in the Marketplace Fairness Act is not the same treatment. They're asking for actually much harsher treatment for online sales. They're asking for online sellers to have to quiz every single one of their customers about which of America's 10,000 taxing jurisdictions they live in, and then they have to be responsible for every last detail of that tax code, whereas a brick-and-mortar store only has one tax code, the one that they're located in, to be concerned about. So they're actually asking for a harsher standard, and that's the problem with the bill.
The R Street Institute and the National Taxpayers Union recently surveyed North Carolinians about this issue. What did you find?
Well, we found, perhaps not surprisingly to some, but to me, somebody who works on this issue a lot, when I dug down, I found the extent to which this was true to be surprising, that people are not fans of this concept. When we asked them about what their views on passing a law like this were, North Carolinians opposed it by a margin of 57% to just 31% in favor. What was surprising to me is when you drill down, Republicans, independents, Democrats, conservatives, moderates, liberals, under basically any breakdown, there are huge margins of opposition to this. Even self-described liberals oppose it by a 13-point margin in the state. And so there's pretty widespread opposition to this, which makes it a little surprising that, as you mentioned, both of North Carolina senators voted for it.
Now, some people may be hearing this conversation and will think, wait a minute, I remember some months ago that there was a deal, North Carolina and Amazon was going to start collecting sales tax. Hasn't this issue already been settled?
Somewhat. So North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, there have been these sorts of fights all across the country. And, settled isn't exactly the word because it's only in relation to Amazon. What Amazon has been doing is building these distribution centers across the country. And so in doing so, they have created a physical presence in most of these states and thus would have to collect sales tax. What they've been doing is cutting deals with some states to say, well, why don't you give us a reprieve? After we build the physical structure, we'll have 2 or 3 years or something before we have to collect sales tax. So they've been sort of cutting these deals left and right, which has in some ways added fuel to the fire of folks who are trying to pass this, what is in my mind, a very misguided federal piece of legislation. So it's not yet settled at this point because they need federal law to be able to give states the power to export their tax burdens across their borders right now. And that's what they're trying to do, and that's the real danger, is that we're going to empower New York and California and Illinois revenue agents to come and harass North Carolina businesses.
In the brief time that we have left, this has passed the Senate with the support of both Richard Burr and Kay Hagan. Now it's in a House committee. What happens next?
Well, what happens next is anyone's guess. This is, I guess, what they pay me the medium-sized bucks to figure out, but I wish I knew. The House has been more deliberative about it. They've had hearings and have actually been doing some real investigation into this. I don't think the House is likely to pass it on their own, but then you get into this end-of-year gamesmanship, like a lame duck session of Congress. So this is part of why we're trying to spread the news about these results and let politicians know what their actual constituents think about it.
And if people wanted to learn more about the survey, they could find it at your website?
They can indeed. Our website is rstreet.org, the letter R, street.org, and we've got more information there than you can shake a stick at.
Andrew Moylan is Executive Director of the R Street Institute. Once again, this is a piece of legislation that is active in Congress. It's already passed the Senate, sits in a House committee. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us and giving us the information on the latest to deal with this particular issue.
Thank you, and happy 4th.
Thank you, and you as well.